New questions today about President Obama's possible strategy against ISIS ahead of his big primetime speech tonight. The president is supposed to outline his plan for combating the terror group in Iraq and probably Syria, and in winning back the territory they have seized very quickly over the last few months there. Our next guest says the president needs to do a whole lot more than talk about this if he's serious about taking on this threat. Tom Joscelyn is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and senior editor for the Long War Journal. Tom, great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
You've written a very insightful piece that I tweeted out. I hope people will take the time to read it. And it's very detailed with the nuances of al-Qaeda and of ISIS, what their long-term strategy and vision is. They have one. They're very committed to it. But how does that square with the way our president views this conflict?
Well, unfortunately, the president's been committed to this idea that all we have to worry about are the few terrorists who immediately threaten the U.S. homeland. The problem is that's not the way our enemies are organized. Most of the resources, most of their fighters have been devoted to something else, which is acquiring territory, acquiring states, so they can build their sort of radical Islamic states based on their very harsh version of Sharia law. And the bottom line is, as we've been sort of picking off individual terrorists here and there, they've been building armies. And so what happened here in Iraq and Syria is not an accident.
Well, how specific do you think the president will be tonight? What does he need to say? I know he's been, we have the photos of him on the phone talking to foreign leaders, important places like Saudi Arabia and others. What kind of coalition do we need to see? What details do you think he'll give us tonight?
Well, the biggest problem I see is really how are we going to actually eject ISIL from the territories it controls. The problem is there are no boots on the ground in either Iraq or Syria that are really capable of doing it at this point. And in Syria, it gets even more perilous because really the rebel opposition in between Assad and ISIL is actually really compromised by al-Qaeda and its allies. So here you have al-Qaeda, which is a rival of ISIL and is also fighting against Assad, and all these rebels inside Syria are very closely allied with them in the fight against Assad. So it's not like we can turn to them to be our boots on the ground, which is what the president has basically said so far.
Well, and yeah, we've heard that repeatedly from numerous members of the administration, the president included. No boots on the ground. It's not what the American people want. They don't have the appetite for it. We're not going to do it. But if we're talking about Syria, where we definitely need some kind of presence on the ground, and we don't know who we can trust there, deciding between various versions of bad guys, how do we accomplish not only stopping ISIS, but as you said, taking back all that territory they very quickly scooped up?
Well, all along I've said that our enemies get a vote and they're going to force our hand. And I think that's what's happening here. Basically, I think America's going to need to play a bigger role, a larger role going forward. Think about Raqqa in Syria. This is a city that pre-war had a population of over 300,000 people. ISIS has been controlling that for over a year and holding that for over a year. How do you eject a group with some airstrikes from a city that they've been controlling for over a year? You just can't, and so we don't really have the ground forces in place to basically force them out. So that basically forces them into a compromised position. Either you just do airstrikes and basically cede their territory to them, right? Or you have to get more involved on the American side, and I think that's what ultimately is going to happen.
In this piece, you go into in depth with the way that the president views the world, especially post 9/11. Things that he's said publicly, we know how he feels about certain things and about the U.S.'s role in the world. Do you think he can evolve on that in a way that will enable us to stop this threat, or do you think he's going to dig in and stick to the way he sees the world?
I think he's evolved somewhat as it is, but it's too late. The problem is that over the last several years, the jihadists have been executing a massive land grab. And the bottom line is we had no strategy because a lot of our elite assumed that didn't matter. And so now we basically are playing catch-up, as you can see in Iraq and Syria. But here's the thing. You and I are probably going to have this conversation. If the president goes through his pullout in Afghanistan, a year, 18 months from now, we're going to be talking about Afghanistan in the same terms. So this is going to happen across the board. What we need is a real comprehensive strategy for rolling back their land grab.
Well, let's see if we get one tonight. Tom Joscelyn, thank you so much. Great piece. Folks should check it out.
Thanks.
John?